Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journey, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2022. That brings us specifically to a discussion of the films that can be found in this really brilliant set, this Blu-ray, multi-disc Blu-ray set release from the Criterion Collection earlier this year, which is 3 films by Mai Zetterling, this set being designated spy number 1162. Today I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on one of the films that is contained within this great set. And this is a film which is described as being from the year 1966. And the name of the film is, and please pardon me for my very poor pronunciation of the Swedish language. I hope you can forgive me. But it is called Nattlik, or as it is known in English, Night Games. This is the work from the year 1966, and it is from the great filmmaker Mai Zetterling, and the screenplay is credited to Mai Zetterling and David Hughes, and based upon the novel by Mai Zetterling. So this is a wonderful reminder of the genius of Mai Zetterling, in that she is an artist of many hats indeed. A filmmaker, artist, screenplay writer, novelist, and also an actor on stage and screen, etc. So here is another work of art from the great Mai Zetterling, and it is, please pardon me once again for my poor pronunciation of the Swedish language, I hope you can forgive me. This is Nattlik, or as it's known in English, Night Games. And among the great cast we have in Night Games, we have Keve Hjelm and Lena Brundin and Ingrid Thulin and others. Wow, what a film this is. So provocative, confrontational, very direct, very honest. And it seeks to go in places that are, frankly, quite uncomfortable in a lot of aspects. But this is, I think, part of the point in terms of an exploration of character and relationship dynamics that forms what can be said to be the core or cores of this very compelling work of art, which is Night Games. So I think if we were to try to focus in on the plot or story structure of Night Games, I think we could focus in on this, say, journey or exploration of this individual, this man that we meet. This is the Keve Hjelm character, and we understand that he is about to be married, Lena Brundin character, but before the marriage is to take place, there is a lot of, say, inspection, there's a lot of internal investigation, there's a lot of looking back upon memories, and this journey or this contemplation of this male character, one of our main characters here, takes place in this sprawling estate with a lot of antiques and antiquities included within it that seem to have a type of holding of value on the one hand, but also perhaps has the paradoxical effect of being rendered, maybe in terms of monetary value anyway, valueless. And this is part of the dynamic, say, journey back that our main character is going through. But that's not all, because in the context, or perhaps in parallel, or maybe in a contravention to the current relationship that he has with his fiancée, the Lena Brundin character, our main character also is looking back in the context of this estate, this almost large, almost palatial sized estate, and also looking back to certain memories that seem to be interwoven with the present tense. And these memories have to do with his time and his memories and his childhood, his time as a young boy. And to be more specific, interactions that he has and memories that he has with regard to his mother being portrayed here by the legend Ingrid Thulin. And so here we have the stage set for a very, how should they put it, a very complex relationship dynamic that this man has in terms of him remembering the relationship dynamic that he had with his mother as a young boy, and also how that, if at all, could affect his viewpoint and his outlook on the relationships that he has as an adult. And that could include the relationship with his fiance or maybe other people that he meets along the way, which also becomes part of the equation as we progress through the so-called present tense of the film. Now, there is so much complex and perhaps from a certain perspective disturbing or uncomfortable aspects that are also the potential or potentially being explored vis-a-vis the relationship between the mother and the son. And here we have the ways in which this seems to have a psychological impact or not. This has a type of an effect or not of showing or showcasing the way or the potential or the viewpoint or perspective of this young man as he maybe has a viewpoint towards relationships with other people, and how his relationship with his mother seems to be affecting this. And we see, therefore, in the flashback structure or the visits to the past or the memories or the memorials, we see the very perhaps what one might call, or maybe how some might describe it, somewhat flamboyant or outwardly eccentric behavior that is displayed by some of the characters, perhaps also including the mother in question, in terms of party scenes, in terms of social gatherings that take place, for instance, at the house itself, and also the way in which the mother is seen or remembered to be encountering or dealing with the notion and also the actuality of childbirth. And this also brings into the fold a very provocative, and at the time of the release in particular in the mid 1960s, considered quite controversial and quite shocking, a depiction of childbirth. And so we have the concept and the theme of parents and children, and also childbirth, and a type of biological and emotional and indeed spiritual aspect and viewpoint and dynamic, and also consideration of these themes, and how these themes might be said to be further, say, explored or expanded upon, or perhaps from a certain point of view, thwarted or twisted in the hands or in the context of this the specificity of this character and her particular journey, because we see quite early on how this theme of childbirth, at least in the context of this character arc, how it's brought to its conclusion within the context of that sequence. So that's one aspect that is very much at play here. Also, too, the relationship between mother and son, and this could be, for example, the son's perspective on the mother, and how that perspective might have something to do with a relationship that is either based wholly in a type of parental aspect, or maybe there is a type of sexuality that is infused within this. One might call, or one might rely on phrases such as Oedipal, or such as a type of sexual fascination, whatever the case may be. Now, we see through the lens of memory how the mother seems to be reacting to these, I don't want to say advances, but to these, say, feelings or expressions. Sometimes the mother seems to be, arguably, maybe, innocently or not, encouraging this activity, and or maybe the mother is seen to be wholly resistant to this activity, and or maybe the mother is seen to be almost violently reacting against such activity. Now, whatever the case may be, and whatever one's interpretation is, still we have this very delicately complex dynamic at play. And this also brings about other scenes, other moments that, again, especially in the context of the mid 60s release of this film, caused quite a stir in terms of depictions of sexuality, and also depictions of, say, arousal and such on screen with regard to certain characters. Now, this also, I think, brought the charge, or some some descriptions or maybe criticisms that use the word, for example, pornography. Now, I wouldn't necessarily describe this film or its content in terms of that phrasing or that terminology. On the contrary, I don't consider this film a type of direct display of frank and explicit sexuality in that respect. However, what I will say is that it does handle and it does deal with and it does discuss these very frank and quite complex and indeed maybe quite uncomfortable themes, but it does so in a way that is very honest to the characters, that is a kind of stark, direct look at a psychological, say, underpinning that this man, as an adult, is now, we understand, maybe facing and experiencing and reliving and remembering and perhaps even confronting the past in order to be able to live in the present. Perhaps that is one way of looking at this. And in order to be able to confront the past, this character needs to come to terms quite honestly with a number of these very frank and perhaps yes uncomfortable situations that are arising vis-a-vis the relationship between mother and son, and also vis-a-vis how the son and this young man views himself and how that may affect his relationships in the present going forward. So in that way, this film is provocative, but it's not provocative for provocation's sake, but rather it is provocative because the story and the character dynamics seem to require it. And that I find very faithful, and it has a sense of fidelity to the characters, a sense of honesty to the characters, and also room for a type of exploration. And I would dare say, too, that it rather than have a sense of sort of an exploitation factor, on the contrary, these themes, when explored, are given a sense of almost blunt type of, say, a nuance to them. In other words, nothing is clearly black and whitely expressed. Nothing is 100%, say, morally assigned one way or another. Rather, the actual discomfort is also expressed on screen a lot. There's a lot to the nuance that's expressed on screen, which thus allows us, the viewer, to really have a subjective and perhaps also objective view of the type of, say, sexual dynamics that are being considered, the type of familial dynamics that are being considered, also types of, say, external, internal dynamics that are being considered when one is taking into consideration this trip into the past. And two, I should point out that Mai Zetterling's cinema is very has a sense of style and verve that we saw in the earlier film Loving Couples, that we'll also see later in the film The Girls. The way in which she interweaves past and present almost seamless, or I should say seamlessly, in a way that is so artistically brilliant, and also it blends a sense of reality and surrealism. It also blends a sense of fantasy and nightmare. It also gives us a sense of past and present that is in a confusing swirl, being explored almost all at once, thus giving a great highlight to the emotional and psychological complexity of the main character in question. In other words, he is living both past and present almost simultaneously, thanks to the way in which cinema, Mai Zetterling cinema, seems to swerve between things that are happening in the past, things that are happening in the present. This gives us a sense of how deeply, say, rooted the main character's psychology is in thinking back into the past, and how it's deeply connected with how he is reacting to the present. So these are not easy questions that are being presented, and it is in fact, on the contrary, very, very much a complex mix of tones and styles and suggestions and discussions that are, I think, very uneasy. But again, this is very much the point. And also, it does not shy away from, say, showing characters in, say, a nuanced and somewhat gray area type of light. But again, I think that is part of the design of the film, and that type of exploration is very, how should I put it? It leads to some very curious and, depending on one's interpretation, very disturbing avenues potentially, but that is nothing to shy away from. In fact, this is once again in terms of the organic and the fidelity nature of the setup of the characters in the hands of Mai Zetterling, David Hughes, and company. We have, I think, a very compelling journey indeed, or I should say, a set of journeys indeed, where things may not be what they seem to be, and relationships may succeed or fall based on how successful one is in a sense, confronting the past and perhaps confronting one's weaknesses. And if that is possible or not, that I think is one of the great focal points of this work, as well as showing us the glide between quote unquote reality and fantasy, or the surreal aspects, as well as a contemplation, a very quiet and perhaps even destitute and desolate sense of contemplation that also ultimately, even among the desolation and the chance encounters and the nuance, which might lead to some very gray areas indeed, might also hopefully and perhaps ultimately lead to some kind of a resolution. Resolving the past in order to live in the present, which in turn will lead us into the future. That's the hope, anyway. So, this is the very, very compelling, challenging, and quite brilliant work, which is from Mai Zetterling, and it is Night Games. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Night Games, as the second Blu-ray disc of this 3-disc set, 3 films by Mai Zetterling. And so just a word about this presentation. Again, the restoration notes are included in this wonderful staple booklet. And it says, loving couples, Night Games, and the girls are presented in their original aspect ratio of 1.66 to 1. These 2K digital restorations were undertaken by SF Studios and the Swedish Film Institute from the 35mm original camera negatives. The original monaural soundtracks were remastered from the 35mm optical soundtrack positives. So once again, like my comments on this topic with regard to loving couples, I must say that with regard to Night Games, my experience with this film is very, 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 very limited indeed. So I don't have any frame of reference in terms of watching this in the theater, for example, or watching a good print of this, for example. So unfortunately, without that frame of reference, I'm unable to give any type of comparative analysis breakdown as to how strong this Criterion based or this 2K restoration release is. That's the basis of this Criterion release. Now, that being said, I must say that I was very compelled indeed. I thought it looked very sharp and very crisp and clear, as well as the sounds as well. And there is a lot of, say, outdoor scenes and indoor scenes, and even those indoor scenes have a sense of depth and shadow to them, especially when we're thinking about the context of the environment and this state. Because there's almost a surreal aspect the way in which the antiques are placed and the framing is set up. It almost has this unreal feel to it. And then you go to the outdoors and it has, on the contrary, a sense of a realistic dynamic, which is a stark contrast, I think, poetically and purposefully applied. And so these dynamics, or these, say, aspects, I feel, are faithfully preserved. And then you have on top of that the layering of the soundtrack. And so this is, for my limited perspective experience, this is all the same a very satisfying presentation, and I was thoroughly engaged indeed when I watched this on this Criterion disc, Night Games. But that's not all, of course, because the disc number 2 has the film itself, and it also has supplements that could be said to be linked to, well, let me just say, it does have a number of supplements here. It has, by my count, 2 supplements. The first one is could be said to be about Mai Zetterling and her career and her filmography overall. But the second one can be said to be directly related to the film Night Game. So let's go in order as they appear in the supplement submenu on disc 2, the disc which features the film Night Games. So what do we find in the supplements for disc 2? So we have this a documentary, a type of documentary portrait, which is approximately 46 minutes. This is described as being from the year 1989 for German television, Katja Raganelli and Konrad Wickler. And this is the work which is called Maybe I Really Am a Sorceress, director Mai Zetterling and her films. Once again, 46 minutes. This is very, very cool indeed. This is such an awesome portrait. I mean, we follow her. We meet Mai Zetterling, in again at this point in time, 1980s. So some years have passed since the making of films like Night Games. But here we have, again, much like the supplements that we saw on the first disc of this release, this is, again, an overview and a history and a biography, an opportunity to learn, once again, more details about the life and times of Mai Zetterling. And so she speaks about her early career, her acting career in the theater, her theater training at a very young age. She found a lot of success at a young age, but she also her career, there was a slight trajectory turn into the world of cinema, and that brought her to England and Rank Studios, and then also there was a turn to Hollywood in a film that featured Danny Kaye. And also she speaks here about why she wanted to be an actor in the first place, what compelled her, and what were the circumstances involved in getting into acting to begin with. And in this conversation too, she gives some details about her family life, or little details or hints or clues perhaps about her family life and how she viewed her family life and the state of things with her family growing up. And that could be said to be other aspects that are relied upon when she then goes into some details about her acting career, again, from an early age. And this then leads her to her work in terms of cinema and Alf Sjöberg and Ingmar Bergman, and then also meeting David Hughes, and then the professional and personal relationship that she had with David Hughes, and the writing collaboration. This is a very kind of a very important collaboration, one of the key artistic collaborations, one can say, which is acknowledged by Mai Zetterling herself, as well as acknowledged here in other aspects of the supplements on this disc and also on other discs as well. And so there's this idea of what she wanted to do, how she came to the decision to want to pursue filmmaking and want to pursue directing as well, because again, she had a well-established career early on in her life as an actor on stage and screen. So there was this choice in terms of going into making films. And we have other people that are participating in a lot of these projects, and also people that are part of her life that are also being interviewed, and those interviews or excerpts are being featured here. So for example, we hear about a little bit of the collaboration, the writing collaboration between Mai Zetterling and David Hughes. It's really interesting to hear how they work together. And also we hear from some of the actors who appeared in some of the films. So for instance, we get an interesting excerpt interview from Harriet Andersson. And of course, Harriet Andersson appears in Loving Couples. She also appears in the later film, which is called The Girls. Gunnar Lindblom also appears in The Girls, and also appears in Loving Couples. And also we have, for example, I should say here that Harriet Andersson's comment here about working with Mai Zetterling on the set of Loving Couples is really interesting indeed. It's almost to the point of she expresses, I don't want to say disapproval, but she does talk about how it wasn't necessarily the most pleasant experience in terms of her working relationship, at least some aspect of it, in the context of Loving Couples. And I think, but she very reasonably and very fairly acknowledges that perhaps part of the reason for that is that Mai Zetterling, as Harriet Andersson acknowledges, was probably under a lot of pressure. She was under a lot of pressure as a director, in terms of her first feature-length directorial effort with Loving Couples, that she was probably under a lot of pressure to really show that, to prove herself as an artist, and also compounded by perhaps a level or atmosphere of sexism as well, that this need, or this almost necessity to have to prove herself, perhaps had its effect on how maybe she was relating to some of the actors on set, for example, Harriet Andersson. But I should point out too that Harriet Andersson does appear in other supplements, in particular what we will talk about when we get to the third disc. So and also she appears in a later film by Mai Zetterling, which is called The Girls. So one can assume that the working relationship is very strong indeed, and she does have some really great compliments and to make elsewhere. So it's good to have this comment here, but it's also good to keep in mind not to take it in isolation, but to consider it in the whole context of the sweep of Mai Zetterling's work, which is one of the great things about the Criterion set, by the way. It gives us the opportunity to look at the legacy and the body of work of Mai Zetterling through the lens of the representative works in these three films themselves, but also her career writ large. And also, there's other people I mentioned, Gunnar Lindblom as well, and how she expresses a very positive experience working with Mai Zetterling and the number of projects that they have done. And also, I'm going to a discussion of night games. We have some comments from Ingrid Thulin. Very fascinating comments as well about this sort of the notion and concept of a sense of a provocation and how far one is willing to go in terms of a certain content and certain, say, probing of thematic discussion. And I think that is very apropos in a conversation of the complexities of a work like Night Games, the brilliant complexities of a work like Night Games. Also, there's talk about other works by Mai Zetterling. Dr. Glass is mentioned, which was also a work, the description of which was made so well also in another supplement on disc number 1, if you recall, in the discussion with Alicia Malone. Here we have another film mentioned, which is again in the context of the 1960s. Unfortunately, it's not part of the set, but it's important, I think, to keep in mind. So there's Dr. Glass. And then also there's a discussion about the film The Girls, which is, again, the third disc here, which we'll talk about in a separate video. Also mentioning Visions of Eight, which is the omnibus Munich Olympic Games film. And of course, Mai Zetterling had one segment in there about, which is the strongest. So these and other points, again, cover the trajectory of Mai Zetterling's life and career, again, with Night Games being one of many examples brought up in this great portrait of the artist. So please check this out if you can. It's a really great portrait. Again, Maybe I Really Am a Sorceress, director Mai Zetterling and her films, again, from 1989. Please check this out if you can. It's really wonderful. That's not all, because then the second supplement found on disc 2 is labeled as TV reporting. And we have Night Games. This is the reporting from Swedish television, again, contemporarily. Again, having some details about the making of Night Games, and also a brief discussion with Mai Zetterling herself. And then the second component of this supplement is also coverage from the 1966 Venice Film Festival. So these two components are combined into this one overall supplement called TV reporting. This one overall supplement is approximately 12 minutes. And so the first part, again, covering kind of the on-site making of Night Games, is, again, we get behind the scenes footage. We have some scenes outdoors, for instance, of the actors, Keve Hjelm and Lena Brunden, for example. And also we have shots of the estate, the house itself, and the interior. And also we have a one-on-one discussion with Mai Zetterling. And so so fascinating. Please, if you have the opportunity, catch too what other project that she was thinking of, what she was hoping to talk about or hoping to get funding for in terms of her work with Shakespeare. So that's also very fascinating itself. So that's the first part of this. And the second part of this TV reporting is focusing in on the coverage made during the 1966 Venice Film Festival. And as we know from discussions in other supplements, it was a very controversial. It was controversial in terms of its reception at such Venice Film Festival, such that there was no public screening but rather the screening was closed off to members of the press only. because it was, I think the official story was, or that it was considered to be a very controversial in terms of its subject matter, indeed, and its handling of sexuality, and what it was deemed to be, or what was described perhaps as being its handling of maybe sexuality, or maybe specifically in a critical way. People regarded it, or certain people regarded it, as having themes of, say, incest or pornography, which actually, I don't know if I would go in that direction. And indeed, I think people like Alicia Molon and others, and Mai Zetterling herself, would contest that in fact the film is not about that. So but it's dealing with certain areas in a very nuanced way. But anyway, this seems to be part of the, say, a swirl of the atmosphere, the controversy that surrounded the film upon its appearance at the Venice Film Festival in 1966. And so we understand that the screening was closed to the public, so the public couldn't see it, but it was open only to the press. So that's commented upon by a commenter in this TV reporting segment. And also there's a little bit of a there was another controversy stirred with regard to the poster. And the poster art that was used but then not shown, and also but that the poster art was in fact relying on artwork of Leonardo da Vinci. So there's a bit of an irony there that's being identified. But in any event, it's talk, again, TV coverage mentioning this idea of censorship and also controversy in the Venice Film Festival. So this is, again, the opportunity to remind us that Night Games was a work that challenged a lot of people. And we saw it from the very outset in 1966. And then perhaps that challenge, that feeling of challenge, lingers on or continues on. But that, I don't think, is in any way a detriment to the film, but rather it shows a type of strength and the effect of the film. And indeed, when one watches the film, I think there is a way in which one can see that maybe these criticisms are perhaps unfounded, although it can be said at the same time that the film deals with, or has a discussion of, very complex and perhaps, yes, to some uncomfortable themes and concerns. So, but that being said, to have this understanding of the critical reaction of the film on the international level, and then also by extension to a little bit later domestically, how this perhaps could be said, and again by Mai Zetterling and others, how this could be said to have had an effect on Mai Zetterling's career and her ability, or non-ability, as the case may have been, to have been able to pursue the other projects that she had wanted to. But in any event, this is also a very important chapter and something to keep in mind when one is watching and considering Night Game. So it's great that the Criterion Collection includes this as part of the supplement. I should point out that this is the end of the supplements for Disc 2, so it would have been really nice, I think, to have maybe a little bit more supplements included here, maybe a discussion directly on Night Games, maybe a commentary track. I could have said the same thing about the Loving Couples disc supplements, and also I could say the same for the third disc on the girls. I wish there could be more, and I think commentary tracks or other film-specific conversations or something of the sort would also have been really great. But that is not to take away anything from the real greatness and depth and real scope of information that we find here and elsewhere. So what we have is really wonderful. And what we have can be said to be, again, a celebration and also introduction to the legacy and life and work of Mai Zetterling, which, for the benefit of people like me, who I'm coming at this world pretty much fresh-eyed and for the first time in a lot of respects, this is very, very helpful indeed. So it's great to have these supplements as they are. So please keep in mind that these are the supplements to be found on Blu-ray Disc 2, accompanying the film Night Games. And last but not least, let me just make a brief mention of the booklet. We will return to a more sort of more complete comments on the essay itself in a later video. But let me just point out here that, as I indicated in another video, the early part, or the first part of this booklet, this great staple booklet, has some write-ups on each of the films, the cast and crew, a little write-up on the film itself. So here is the section of the 2 pages devoted to night games on pages 6 and 7 of the booklet. So please check that out as you can. Once again, after these sections, there is the overall comprehensive essay on all of the works themselves. So we will talk about this essay as part of our overall discussion in a later video, but please keep this in mind. It's also a good reference point when one is considering night games or any of the other works found in this wonderful set, which is 3 films by Mai Zetterling, included in which is this work from 1966, which is Night Games. All right, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great, great movies, including the films of Mai Zetterling. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.